Good morning, folks. We're just going to wait till a couple minutes past the hour so folks can join. Until then, you will see this screen. Thanks so much. All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. This is the Social Enterprise Capital Grant Program webinar. And this webinar is being recorded and it will be posted on the Social Enterprise Capital website on mass.gov. So please, if you're looking for a replay, this will be available shortly. Again, welcome. So I'm happy to introduce myself. I'm Alexandra Pulio. I'm Deputy Director for Communities and Programs here at the Executive Office of Economic Development. And I'd like to introduce my colleague, Alyssa, as well, who's the Program Manager. Yeah, thanks, Alyssa. So today we're going to talk about the FY 2026 round of the Social Enterprise Capital Grant Program. First, we're just going to give an overview of the program. We're going to talk about the eligibility criteria. We're going to look at key elements and dates from the RFP, the application highlights, and then we'll have time for some Q&A. If you do have general questions, you can type them into the Zoom Q&A at the bottom of the page. We'll review these and answer them as time allows, and as sort of relevancy for the group allows. I know some folks have very specific questions. Questions will also be aggregated and posted in an FAQ on the program's website. If you have a question that is really only about your specific organization or your project, you can also send that to eohedgrants@mass.gov. Sorry, that cut off a little bit there at the bottom, but it's eohedgrants@mass.gov. We'll show that again at the end of the presentation too. Okay, so this program was created to invest in employment social enterprises that contribute to economic growth in low-income communities throughout the state. We're trying to support social enterprises that sell goods and services while also providing jobs and supportive services to folks who face barriers to employment for various reasons. This is a capital grant program, and it is a competitive grant program. And we give grants solely to nonprofits that meet the specific eligibility requirements of the program. And I do really want to emphasize that today. I know that it's pretty specific criteria, so we're going to kind of drill down into that a little bit more. But I do want to be really clear that there is like very specific criteria for this program. So if you have questions about whether you're eligible, hopefully we'll answer a lot of those in the coming minutes. We're also looking to develop eligible facilities for the employment social enterprise. So to be used specifically for that program that target low-income individuals. We have two types of grants for this program, both capital grants. One is to acquire property to be owned by the nonprofit for the social enterprise. So if you have a social enterprise that employs people to prepare food for a catering company, um, an example of that would be maybe purchasing a commercial kitchen. The second type of grant that we make through this program is for renovation, repair, or rehabilitation of a property that's already owned by the nonprofit for the social enterprise. So this can include renovating a property you already own. Maybe you have a social enterprise that does carpentry services. Um, Maybe you want to renovate your wood shop, for example. That would be a renovation project for a property that's already owned. All right. So how do we define a social enterprise? That's in the name of the program, right? So how do we think about what a social enterprise is? So we're looking for a business venture that's run by a mission-driven nonprofit, where the programming is focused on both hiring and assisting people who face barriers to employment. The organization, so the nonprofit, has to offer paid employment opportunities to low-income individuals, with priority to socially and economically disadvantaged populations who experience complex needs and barriers to employment that require intensive intervention. So the takeaway here, right, is about well, all of this is important, but paid employment opportunities is sort of the heart of this, right? It's not a workforce training program per se; it's an actual job where folks come to work and are paid. They may learn on the job as well. But a workforce development program alone, where you get job training, is not the same as an employment social enterprise. Okay, so to be eligible for funding, the applicant must meet all of the following requirements. First, must be a Massachusetts nonprofit organization in good standing. Successfully operating an employment social enterprise for at least 12 continuous months prior to April 1st, 2025. So this means that your social enterprise must be employing people for at least the past year. That in that case, like if you're purchasing a facility right now with the goal of hiring and employing people in the coming year, that's not going to be an eligible social enterprise. You're going to want to look for funding that will let you get that program started, and then potentially you would be eligible a year from now. Um, the applicant should be the current or the imminent owner of the real estate to be purchased, repaired, rehabilitated, or renovated. So the applicant must be the nonprofit, and the nonprofit has to either own the real estate or be reasonably far along in the process of acquiring it. So that, things like you have an accepted offer, you have a purchase and sales agreement, you have a closing date, things like that. And the applicant has to be offering paid employment to low-income individuals and prioritizing socially and economically disadvantaged populations who experience complex needs and barriers to employment that require intensive interventions. So when we know we're talking about paid employment opportunities, folks have to be employed by the nonprofit organization, and the nonprofit has to pay them. We'll talk about this in a minute, but at least the Massachusetts minimum wage. Um, and they have to be actual employees of the nonprofit. They can't be like 1099 contractors. They can't be employees of a third party. They have to be employed by the nonprofit and be provided a specific set of services here as well. And we have to pay participants in the social enterprise no less than the Massachusetts minimum hourly wage. If you are paying a sub minimum wage, you're not eligible for this program. It has to be the Massachusetts minimum wage. Okay, so the statute that created this program also says that a certain set of services must be provided to everyone who is employed by the social enterprise, and also plan to provide them to future participants. That includes outreach to the targeted population. So if your social enterprise is specifically focused on serving people who were recently released from incarceration, you're going to want to have an outreach plan about how you would contact folks who might be about to be released, and might be interested in participating in the program. You would also need to provide on-the-job training and skill development, including work site supervision and performance coaching. So we're looking at things like, helping folks as you would do in most employment situations, giving them feedback on their performance, talking through challenging issues. Often this involves, right, working with folks to give them multiple chances to work through challenges that they may have in the employment setting. Applicants should be providing comprehensive support services for at least 1 year, including but not limited to case management, aimed to help overcome barriers to employment. So we're talking about working with populations that are particularly difficult to retain or employ. And so we want to make sure that we're providing comprehensive support services that will keep those folks engaged and keep them making strides towards potential other workplace advancement. So if you're working with folks who are in recovery from addiction, um, if you're working with folks who are homeless, you know that continuing engagement is really critical to keeping folks working, keeping folks involved in services. So really, there has to be at least 1 year window of comprehensive support services. And of course, our hope is with folks that they will be given assistance to obtain external employment, right? So they're able to develop workforce skills, they're able to develop great workforce habits, to get the support that they need to work on other aspects of their personal economic lives, and with the hope that they are able to move on to external employment eventually and make that spot available to someone else in the future. And last but not least, job retention services, including following up with folks for at least 1 year afterwards and following up with their employers to support job retention and advancement. So wherever they go from here, you have a relationship with their employer. You are going to continue to work with them to make sure that they're making a successful transition from a more supportive workplace into maybe a more traditional workplace. Okay. So, there's as I mentioned, there's a lot of eligibility criteria in this RFP. I know and see that this sometimes is pretty confusing to folks. So we're going to kind of talk about this in a little bit of a different way for a minute. So if you're looking for practical markers of whether you are a currently eligible social enterprise organization, and of course you want to refer to the RFP as the end all be all authority here, but I'm trying to break this down a little bit here. So does your organization sell goods or services? This is the first marker of whether this is a social enterprise that's eligible for this program, right? So you're selling goods or services. So you might be providing catering services, providing landscaping services. You might be selling artwork, clothing, jewelry in a retail setting. There has to be some kind of commercial transaction here for this to be an eligible employment social enterprise. The applicant organization must be an IRS registered nonprofit. So you have an IRS determination letter that says that you are a nonprofit organization. You must be employing people who might not otherwise be in the workforce. So not just training, not just working with, not referring, but actually employing people who might not otherwise be in the workforce. If you give them a W-2 at the end of the year, that's a good marker that you're their employer. You have to be paying the employees at least the Massachusetts minimum wage, not a sub minimum wage, not paying them as a contractor, paying them an hourly rate. Providing supportive services to the people employed by the social enterprise. So you're providing services to people who are in your employment. This is sometimes sort of an element of nuance between an organization that is a nonprofit who have staff who are from the target population, as distinguished from a social enterprise where we're talking about providing the services to the people who are employed there, not necessarily as like professionals who have the life experience of the folks that you're working with, but as folks who are in a supportive workplace environment. And a really important marker of eligibility is you've been providing these employment positions and these services for at least 1 year. So these are all, when we have the eligibility form and submittable, that's a really helpful marker of, you think about these questions, look at the eligibility form and submittable, and if you're answering these questions in such a way that you're saying, oh, okay, like actually we don't do that, we don't provide that service, then you're probably not an eligible organization. Okay, some important distinctions for the purposes of this grant program. If you're offering goods or services for free, this is a really worthy community service, right? We know there's tons of folks in our communities who need to be provided with services like food, um, housing assistance, clothing, other kinds of immediate needs, other kinds of needs in general. Really worthy to be providing goods or services for free. This is not a social enterprise. If you're a food pantry, an addiction recovery support group, um, that is not selling goods or services. That is a different type of organization. If, for the purposes of this program, you're providing job training, but not actual employment. So you're training folks to go find a job elsewhere. You're helping them to access job training services. Even if you're paying them a stipend to participate in job training, that's still different than an employment setting. Paying a stipend without that other employer relationship is different. And for the purposes of this program, it's important to know that only employers are eligible for this program. Okay, so employment is foundational. It's not incidental to the organization's mission. So we're really looking for an organization who employing people who are in this vulnerable group is a key part of what they do. Again, as I mentioned, it's right, it's a great best practice to have staff who have lived experience being part of the population that you're serving. That's awesome. Like, that's a really important thing. And also, that doesn't make it a social enterprise. Employment for folks needs to be a key part of what you're working to do, not just like, oh, we happen to have staff that are part of the target population we're trying to serve. And I think I may have hammered this enough, but employers have to work for the social enterprise that's applying. They can't be a third part of a third party employer. You can't be referring them elsewhere. All right, here are some examples of a social enterprise. We're looking at a nonprofit that employs returning citizens. We've already talked about this a little bit. People who have recently been released for incarceration, in a catering business that teaches culinary job skills and certifications while also providing job coaching, counseling, housing support, and case management, among other services. Again, the key distinction here is they're employing the returning citizens. They're paying them to produce catering food, while also providing a supportive workplace that encourages workforce development. Another example could be a nonprofit that employs people with developmental disabilities in a retail setting that teaches retail skills and management while also providing supervision, case management, and support for independent living, among other services. All right. I'm sure we've talked about eligibility a lot, so let's move on. Some key dates for this program. The RFP opened last week, April 2nd. This is the information session. It's April 9th. The application deadline is May 5th at 11:59 p.m. The applications will come in through submittable. The link is provided on the website. I do want to make sure folks are aware, technical assistance is only available until 4 p.m. on the day of the deadline. So that means that after 4 p.m., you can certainly use submittable.com/help, just a great resource. But EOED staff will not be available to help you troubleshoot whatever's going on if you're having a problem with a form. So really encourage you to try to get towards hitting that submit button before 4 p.m. on May 5th. We expect to give notification of the awards in July and to start contracting for reimbursement eligibility starting in July of this year. All right. We will be making grants of up to $250,000. We expect to make multiple awards. At the time of the award, we'll work with the grantee to develop the final scope and budget. This is a cost reimbursement grant program. So the awardees will need to demonstrate that they have spent the money on the eligible project, and then they will be eligible for reimbursement on a quarterly basis. So as we talked about at the jump, oh, sorry, can we go back just a second? We talked about at the jump a little bit, reimbursement of capital costs, right? So we're reimbursing for two types of programs, which is purchasing real estate or repairing, rehabilitating, or renovating real estate that's already owned by the social enterprise. And this can include purchase and installation of necessary industrial equipment. However, the equipment should not be like incidental to the renovation. The renovation should not be incidental to the equipment. The renovation should be the primary project, with the equipment being an aspect of it. The grant will be available for reimbursement of expenses between July 1st, 2025 and June 30th of 2026. Thank you. All right, our review criteria, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on here because we go into a lot of depth on this in the RFP. You can see it all in detail. It's a 110-point scale with 10 of those being bonus points for advancing equitable opportunities. All right, the application. So a complete proposal packet, including all of these things, we'll talk about that, should be submitted by 11:59 p.m. on May 5th via Submittable. That includes completing the eligibility screening, completing the application form in Submittable, uploading your budget form, and then providing proof of current or imminent property ownership. So that can be a range of things. That can be a deed, that can be your mortgage, that can be a purchase and sales agreement. If you have questions about that, you can email us or you can put it in here and we'll try to answer it if we have time. So the application is available at eoedcommunityprograms.submittable.com. It's also linked on mass.gov. That's probably going to be easier for you. Okay. The online application form is available through Submittable. Don't use it in Explorer. Please don't. It's not going to work. You're not going to be happy. Don't use it. You'll need to create a free Submittable account. You can save drafts of your work as you go, and you'll receive confirmation that you've submitted it via email, and then you'll be able to like log back in and see that it's in Submittable and that your application exists. I do want to emphasize, I should have said this before, your application is submitted through Submittable. It's one swoop. It cannot be edited after it goes in. So if you submit it, your only option after that is to withdraw it and submit a new application. Well, that's really the only option. So if you submit it, it's submitted, it's gone. And so I really encourage you to make sure that you're ready to submit when you do that. We are not accepting additional documents. If you send something to EOETD grants, if you send something to me, that will not be reviewed as part of your application. So please, if you have any materials, provide them in the application when you submit it. Great, thank you. Okay, so we're not going to talk too much about the application right now because you can see it in Submittable, you can see it, the template at the end of the RFP. But if you have questions about how to use your Submittable account, look at Submittable customer support. That's submittable.com/help. They have great guides. Okay, I think this is a really important point, collaboration. So you can work with other people in Submittable. If you're not familiar with Submittable, you don't have to be doing the application by yourself. In the upper right-hand corner, there's a little button that says Manage Collaborators. you're going to want to use that feature because a lot of reasons. One, cybersecurity. You don't share your login with other people. You don't want other people accessing your submittable account, even if you trust them deeply. Don't do that. And then the other part of this is that if you have multiple people logged in to your submittable application or your submittable account even at the same time, that can prevent you from being able to submit your application. So I have seen this happen. Please don't let it happen to you. Don't miss the deadline because you and your colleague were both using the same login to work on the same application. Submittable is going to get confused. It doesn't know which version of your application is the current one, so it's not going to let you submit any of them. Don't do that. Use the collaboration tool. Do keep in mind one thing I want to note too, that your collaborators will not be able to submit the application. Only the person who started the application and invited the collaborators will be able to submit it. So just keep that in mind when you're dividing responsibilities. Proof of ownership, there is an upload space to do that. The budget form. You're going to download this Excel budget form from the mass.gov Social Enterprise Capital website. You're going to fill it out and then you're going to upload it back in. You're going to put in the requested amount, if you have other match funds, and the total project budget. You're going to include the source of other funds. If you don't put a source of other funds in there, I cannot verify if that is accurate or not. Other funds are not make or break. You don't have to have other funds supporting the project, but it is beneficial to your application. Okay, we talked about this already. This is what it actually will look like in Submittable when you go to upload the grant budget form. It shouldn't have that many file types, but it's going to be an Excel sheet, so problem solved. All right, and then at the end, when you're all done, you're going to check that box that says, yes, I am certified to submit this. I'm authorized to submit this application on behalf of my organization. You're going to put your name in and the date, and you're going to submit it. All right, now we come to the question and answer portion of this conversation. Okay, so we have many FAQs. I'm going to run through some of these, and then I am going to look to our Q&A box here, which I see has some questions in it already. Awesome. Okay, my organization is a for-profit business that employs many people. Can we apply to this program? No, I'm sorry, this program is not for you. You must be a IRS registered nonprofit with an IRS determination letter. You also see in the submittable eligibility form that you do have to put in the nonprofit organization, and submittable will verify the nonprofit. So unfortunately, this is not the program for you, even if you are employing and supporting many people as a for-profit. Okay, our nonprofit is under contract to purchase a piece of real estate for the social enterprise. Can we apply for grant funds to renovate that property? Yes, you can apply for a project that does both, assuming that you can get both of those things done within the 1-year time frame. So if you're super confident, you're about to close on this purchase, you'd like money for the purchase, and you'd like money for the renovation, you definitely can apply for that. You are able to check both boxes in submittable if you're applying for both. So you just, again, want to explain what your project is and how this would be providing funds to support that. Okay, another question. My organization doesn't directly employ people, but we do help local employers. For example, we help support small businesses. Are we eligible for this program? This is when I wish we were live, because then I would ask you all. No, you cannot. You have to be a direct employer. Again, lots of wonderful things happening out here in the world. Amazing organizations doing great work. This program is not suited to a small business support program. My nonprofit leases our space. Can we request grant funds for renovations? No, you do need to be the owner of your space to request funds for renovation. Awesome. All right. So, it's now about halfway through the hour. I see there are quite a few questions in here. So I am going to try to address these as best we can. Owned is a requirement or is long-term lease acceptable? Um, like any rule, there's a good exception to it. Owned, a very long-term lease, if you're talking about like 100-year lease, uh, you can apply and we can make a determination. Otherwise owned is a requirement, yes. Asking for a definition of real estate, for example, would a mobile retail store or food truck that would be owned by the nonprofit count? No, this program is no longer funding vehicles. We haven't funded vehicles for a couple of years. Real estate, we're using like the Mass General Law definition here, so it has to be real property. It can be a structure or it can be land, or both. It cannot be any kind of mobile vehicle, even something that's like parked that's a vehicle is not going to be eligible for that purpose. If a nonprofit is acquiring a property and the social enterprise is part of what will take place at the new site, but not the entire building, is that okay? Maybe. I think you would really need to talk about like what the space is for, what you're asking for grant funds to do, how that relates to the social enterprise. Would an applicant be considered if they meet all of the other eligibility criteria and provide all the services, but supportive services are offered for less than a year? No, that is a statutory requirement that it be provided for at least 1 year. So we can't consider that. Okay. Can you talk about the submission process and application format at the end? I think we've covered that. If you have a specific question about submittable, feel free to add it in this chat and we'll get to it, or add it in the Q&A. I'm sorry. Okay, just marking some of these done so that I can not duplicate myself. Is this focused on full-time employment or would part-time employment qualify as well? Can be full or part-time. That's a great question. Yep, either one. Question about going back to the marker slide. Alyssa, do you mind going back? Oh, I think we'll pass it. You're looking at this one or you're looking at the more colloquial one, Colleen? Oh. So there's this one and then there's one like a couple of more, and I think that might be the one.
In the future?
Yeah, thank you.
Huh.
All these animations will get you, huh? All right. One more.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna leave it here. And if anybody has follow-up questions on that, you can put them later down and I'm gonna keep working through these. Okay, we did that. We're building a new community space building at our social enterprise. Is a portion of the construction eligible? I think it really depends on what you're doing in that community space building. Without knowing what you're doing there, it's really hard for me to say. Yeah. I think you would really have to talk about how that was part of the social enterprise and how that would expand social enterprise capacity, potentially. Can you provide examples of repairs or eligible products? Okay, so okay, great. Some examples, I think we gave a couple examples. I'll give a couple more. We had a grantee a couple of years ago who was operating a social enterprise that created packaging materials. And they had an old building that needed repairs to like the elevator and fire suppression systems and the windows in that space. So that was something that was funded in the social enterprise building. Another example, we had a social enterprise that was renovating a building that they owned on a farm to build out a commercial kitchen to offer a different type of social enterprise employment for the folks who were engaged in their social enterprise. So we did fund the renovation and some of the equipment in the kitchen. I think those are some good examples. I'm gonna move on. If you have more specific questions, feel free to add them later. We already touched on the matching funds. Um, Can you provide more detail on the population served? The examples you gave are high risk beyond low income as stated in the RFP. I see the priority is to be socially and economically disadvantaged and have barriers to employment. Maybe that's why the only examples were recently incarcerated and disabled persons. Actually, there were a couple other examples in there, like people in recovery from addiction. Um, yeah, recently incarcerated people in recovery from addiction, homeless folks. Those are all some good examples. Yeah, the priority is to be socially and economically disadvantaged and have barriers to employment. But I think there's a lot of different ways that folks could experience that social and economic disadvantage. So I'm sure with the populations that folks serve, they can think about how the folks they serve might be socially or economically disadvantaged. And nonprofit incubators of cooperative businesses that operate on their property be eligible? No, because unless the nonprofit is employing the co-op workers somehow, that I don't think that would meet the eligibility. Um, the employment spoke. That's an interesting question. Yeah, I don't think that's that's more in like the small business support realm, I would say, than the social enterprise realm. It's not, that's an interesting question. I don't know. If you have more detail, you can email us maybe. That's sort of an interesting question because like I can think of like kind of one-off examples, but in general, that's not going to meet the employment spoke, I think. Okay. Regarding my question about eligible projects above, were current owners of a building in need of roofing and solar panel repairs, would this be eligible? Sure, roofing repairs could be eligible if the building is being used for the social enterprise. You'd have to show how the repair impacts the social enterprise specifically. Solar panel repairs, I assume that you're talking about repairing solar panels. Assuming you meet all the other eligibility criteria and can demonstrate the link between the repairs needed and the facilities used for a social enterprise, that sounds like it would be reasonable. If the real estate development is not starting construction until 2027, can you apply? No. The expenses have to be incurred between July 1st, 2026 and June 30th, 2027, and you have to have a current social enterprise. So maybe you have a current social enterprise that's working at another site right now, and that's why you're asking that question, maybe. But you're not going to be eligible for reimbursement. It's a cost reimbursement based system. So I don't think that would work. But But if you have other expenses and you do have a current social enterprise, you have expenses that are going to occur during the grant period, you could think about it, but I would really think strategically about that one. Are fiscally sponsored nonprofits eligible? No, they're not. You have to have an IRS determination letter. When do the funds have to be used by? It is a cost reimbursement grant program. Funds have to be used between July 1st, 2025 and June 30th, 2026. That is the only time for which expenses can be reimbursed. We are a nonprofit. We recently acquired a new space that needs funding for renovations. Workers have been paid from another organization, but it's transferring to us. Can we qualify? I think I'd want to know more about that transfer before I would say that. Like, if you yourselves have not been the employers or operating the social enterprise, that suggests to me that that may not meet the eligibility criteria. They would need to be transferred to you for at least a year, I would say. There's some nuance to that question, I think, there. That might be worthy of an email, but my initial instinct is that you would have to be their employers for a year. A question about what are the workers' comp and unemployment insurance requirements? Are other benefits supposed to be offered, mass health insurance, dental, etc., or is setting them up with mass health connector care sufficient? We expect all employers to operate according to Massachusetts general laws. Thanks. On page 5 of the RFP, section E, above track record, please hold while I pull this up. All right. Thank you for providing the markers in the RFP. I appreciate that. Section, page 5, section E. Yeah, okay. We're asked to provide evidence that a significant portion of the organization's time and budget is devoted to the social enterprise operations. Can you elaborate on this? We're a $73 million budget and our social enterprise is about $5 million. I'm not exactly sure what you're asking. We are looking to see that your organization is devoting a significant portion of their efforts to supporting the social enterprise. So you're providing all the necessary services that the social enterprise needs. You're providing the facilities, you're providing the staff. I can understand with a budget of that size that the social enterprise is a fairly small sector, but we also want to see that the money from the social enterprise is going back into the social enterprise, ideally. So I think that is kind of the core of the question. If you, yeah, I don't think that's it's not going to be like punitive to you that you have a large organization of which the social enterprise is a part, but we do want to see that the social enterprise is a robust part of whatever you're doing. So I think that is the kind of the core of the value in that question, or in that section. Yeah. That you're adequately resourcing the organization and that it is receiving the organizational attention that it needs to be successful. Can budget costs include operating costs as well as capital and renovation? No, this is a capital grant program. We do not include operating costs. It can only be renovation, purchase, repair, equipment as part of a renovation. Again, capital equipment. So capital equipment is equipment over $5,000 that is a fixture. So it can't easily be moved or removed. And yes, that's as far as I'm going to get into that right now. Great. Okay. Could the applicant be a co-owner of a property, for example, purchasing a property in collaboration with another agency that is not a social enterprise, but the grant funds would be used to renovate or acquire a portion of the space being used for the social enterprise? That is a very interesting question. I think it would really depend on what the other organization is and what they do, how the space would be allocated. There's a lot of questions there. I'm not going to say no, but I definitely think that you would need to authoritatively demonstrate that your organization has primary control over that space. Might be a little difficult to prove if you're a co-owner. Part of the concern here, and this also goes to an earlier question about why this is an ownership only program. So when we're investing state dollars into a capital project, um, there are serious like restrictions that we need to take if a capital improvement has been made to a property that is not owned by the organization. And we have learned from experience that when you spend money in a space that is not owned by an organization, that there is a risk that the owner will be enriched by that improvement, and that enrichment, um, in the event that the property is sold somehow or that the organization using it no longer has access to it, um, that is like a legal enrichment that the state has to like claw back if it's not continued to be used for the intended purpose. So um, that's a big problem for us. That's a big problem for this program. It's a big problem for the Commonwealth. Um, we are trying to avoid that happening by restricting only to ownership, because we've seen it happen, right? It's not it's not a good use of taxpayer funds to have a private owner be enriched by state dollars, and then we lose access to that funding. Okay, that was a long explanation for something that didn't need it, but here we are. Okay, we had talked about the co-owner situation. Yeah, I don't know. You would really need to demonstrate that your organization has primary control over the property, which I think is difficult with the co-ownership situation. Um, okay. How many employee individuals need to be employed by the social enterprise? Could there be both employment and workforce development? I mean, theoretically, I think it's really difficult. You would really need to distinctively prove that there is like a social enterprise shop and a workforce development shop and that they're different, because otherwise it's like you're paying a few people, but you're not paying all people. And I think that gets really confusing. You would need to be able to show that there's a clear distinction between the social enterprise, selling goods and services, employing people, and the workforce development side. Because theoretically, a social enterprise in this program should be a workforce development program, but it's one that people get paid to participate in as employees, right? So, yeah. Wow, you guys are really bringing the questions today. That's good. All right. Colleen, you found what you needed. Great. Lisa, you have a lot of very specific questions about populations, and I think it's really important that I restate here that like you need to define how the population is vulnerable and how it meets the criteria of the RFP. Like I have given you some examples, I think, of folks who are um we would consider per se to be in that group, but there's no like hard and fast line about who meets that criteria and who doesn't. So we would look in the target population section, the evaluation criteria. You can see some of the things that we look for. And if you have a specific question about that, I'm happy to talk about it. But I see there's a lot of like questions about what makes someone vulnerable here. And I think that there are strong cases to be made across the board. We talked about the incubator question. Okay, if you're a social enterprise, this is a good question. This comes up a lot. If your social enterprise is mainly done outside of the building, like vending machines, stockage, cleaning services, we see a lot of this landscaping, things like that. But the supportive services are done within the building where repairs are needed. Is that eligible? Yes. Yes, you're using the building for the social enterprise. Sorry, I'm reading. Organization is a private nonprofit college. We offer co-op and apprenticeship. The employer partners are paying the students. Is this an eligible model? No, this is not an eligible model. The employees have to be employed by the nonprofit organization, the social enterprise itself. Yes, this recording will be made available. It'll be posted on mass.gov as soon as our comms team is able. Okay, even if you have a fiscal sponsor who is a 501c3, this program does not fund folks who don't have an IRS determination letter. You have to have an IRS determination letter. You may receive other state funding. This program requires you to have an IRS determination letter. All right, great. Okay, we have some other fairly specific questions that we haven't really gotten to, but I am going to try to, I think we have time maybe for one or two more that I'm going to try to get to here. And we'll see how far we get here. So the question about we're building a new community space building, is a portion of the construction eligible? Then there was a follow-up that it's a community space that's an accessible break space. I mean, I think you'd have to demonstrate how that is important to the social enterprise. I'm not going to rule it out if it's being used by the social enterprise at a break space, but if that's only a small portion of the use, you definitely want to think strategically about that. Okay. That. Okay. A couple questions here about sort of like timed duration programs. I mean, it's not ineligible to have a time duration program that's like a certain period of time for which you're paid, and then a certain amount of time for which you retain services. I would just really emphasize here that when we're looking to fund a high risk population, you want to really show that the duration of your program is sufficient to meet folks' needs and demonstrate that they are making a successful transition. and able to remain in that successful transition with their 1 year of follow-up services from the time that they exit your program, from the time that they finish? Can they maintain a relationship with a case manager? Can they continue to receive services? Um, that relationship needs to continue for a year from the time they exit your employ. And you need to show, if you have a timed program, that the duration of the program, again, is sufficient to help folks meet their basic needs, make a successful transition into a non-supportive workspace. If they're exiting your supportive work situation and going to a different supportive work situation, I would kind of question whether they're receiving like the duration of support that they need to meet that goal. Okay, so we're at the end of our time here. We've had a lot of questions. Appreciate all your questions. Appreciate your patience as I tell you the eligibility criteria 47 times. Thank you for being here. If you have questions that we didn't answer, you can email eohedgrants@mass.gov and we will do our best to answer for you. We will also be posting the FAQ or probably around the same time we post the recording. So I would look for that probably in about a week. So thank you for your time. Appreciate your being here. Thank you for the great work you do. Talk to you sometime. Thanks a lot.